So here I am minding my own business, playing with Remy, and I'm ready to cheer on Trench Crusade and be like, wow, it's so nice that they have their own STL files and you don't have to buy plastic sprues and all that. And then the news comes out. So yeah, just enjoy this video for what it is. Enjoy my feeble attempt at Grimdark. Here's the video. So this is Malam, the Prince of Famine, and let me tell you, there is a lot going on with this model. It's an awesome model by Trench Crusade. It was printed by a friend of mine, Charlie and the Mini Factory. When it came to painting this model, I decided to give it a zenithal priming. Not the best or the most accurate, but it did give me a better sense of volumes, especially considering how huge it is. I didn't want to be missing any important details or just like overdoing every single thing. For the base of the skin, I mixed brown and purple as I'm currently obsessed with purple shadows. And yes, somehow I made the perfect color mix for sort of a darkish chocolate. I spent literally ages defining the muscles of this character, just like adding more purple and then adding in more whites. I really wanted to define all those muscle fibers, making him look kind of skinny and dehydrated. After this first pass, the highlights were a bit too exaggerated and lifeless. So I did do a wash to bring some color back into it, and I did add a bit of purple again. Even though you can barely see it, I just like to know it's there. In the end, it did look more nuanced than before. After spending a half a day on this, I moved on to the wings, and these are very detailed and beautifully sculpted. So I took advantage of that with some dry brushing, and that picked up all the little details in the feathers. I've been trying dry brushing by dipping the brush in a slightly wet sponge first, and then brushing the paint off on cardboard, and the results are a lot less chalky and more controlled than before, so I definitely recommend trying something like this if you haven't before. It does take a bit of trial and error, obviously you don't want too much moist in the brush, but definitely give it a go. If you're enjoying this video so far, it'd be great if you give me a like and also hit the subscribe button. I know I don't post that often, but when I do, I try to bring you some new ideas and stuff that we can discuss as well in the comment section. Back to the painting, another wash I tried was Voodoo Shade, which looked a bit more yellow than I expected. I find it really hard to get a balance of the saturated tone. Somehow there's always too much color going on. This was also my first ever try at Grimdark. Take whatever I say with a pinch of salt. This is just me trying stuff out. If you have a better way to do it, please let me know. I wanted to make sure all the volumes on the little armored dude and the demon fellas were properly painted, so I did take my time with them, and more for practice than final result, to be honest. I needed the demon fellas to look more demon-y. I did like an exaggerated whitish highlights, which I then covered with a wash. This is something that I've been doing. I guess if I think something is not good, I kind of make it look a bit too white and then use it like a wash or a shade to bring back color into it. At this point, the model was looking all kinds of wrong, at least in my opinion. There was too much color, there was not really any cohesion between all the hues, and I think this happens a lot when you're painting, especially if you have a more complex model. But in the end, you just have to trust the process, and you know that you can always fix things later. Like I said before, the wings had quite a few details, including metallic fences. So I tried a metallic speed paint, which, to be honest, I'm not so sure why these exist. They are so watery, and the final result is just underwhelming. I just think a proper metallic paint would do a much better job. I started adding some bloodiness to things, and this is when Grimdark magic happened. Meet the oil wash. This was made essentially with black oil and a tad of purple. I was quite generous in the application. As you can see, I let it dry for about 50 minutes. I thought oil washes were kind of a pretty scary thing to do, and to be fair, they still kind of are, but now that I've seen how it works, I just want to do it like on every model. I would say the final result is super rewarding. So to get to that, I started scrubbing the oil paints off with actual makeup sponges, which is a bit of a waste. I think I'll get cheaper stuff next time. Then I used a couple of small sponges as well for the details. These were not super sharp, so it's kind of hard to get into corners. Having cheap sponges that I can cut to size is probably the ideal, and it's not going to break the bank, so next time I'll definitely do that. For the base, I wanted to try AKK's Dirt. It's hard to explain what it does, but as you can see, it creates this light dirt effect. I also added a bit to the inside of the wings, just to see what happened. One of my favorite parts of painting the base of a miniature is usually using pigments. That's usually the last thing I do. So I got my usual bunch together and started adding rust, not to the base actually, it was to the metallic bits between the wings. Then I did a bit of brown dirt and some greenish pigments to add like a dirtier, maybe a bit mossy and moldy look. I added also charcoal, and this is more kind of like to some crevices and in the shadows, just to have that contrast. I think the final look here was kind of interesting, I was quite happy with that. Lastly, I did try something else, which is a pigment fixer. After doing this, I actually saw other people adding way less fixer. I think I kind of just drowned the base with it. Next time, I'll just do it a bit more lightly, and if I do have an airbrush, I will just spray it, and that's probably the best way to do it. So here is the reveal. Let me know what you think of the finished piece. I did add some green oozing on the skin and shiny green eyes, which I think it did add a bit more interest overall. I'm always open to feedback, and I know my process at the moment is actually probably way too time consuming and not in the right order, but I'm just figuring things out. I also wanted to end the video by saying that I think being able to 3D print models like this at home is such an awesome thing to do. And even though plastic models have their own market and they do exist for a reason, I just think that whether you like painting or playing or both, 3D printing is really about, you know, having a bit more creativity, whether you're kind of like making the model yourself or asking someone else to do it or buying something that already exists. What matters is that you don't let creativity die and to do whatever makes you happy. My name is Mars, this is Roll for Paint, and I'll see you in the next one. Look at him.